G'day and welcome to the Campfire Project. Today I'm here with Aveline Clarke, who is a host of the Six Star Business podcast and co-founder of the Six Star Business community. And I'm also here with Ian Westmoreland, men's life mentor and communication specialist and creator of the Kintsugi Heroes. And together, they put together and launched the Kintsugi Heroes podcast. Welcome to the Campfire Project, guys.
Thank you, Alan. So good to be here.
Thanks, Alan. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about something we're both passionate about.
Yeah, well, we've known each other all three of us have known each other for quite some time. And Ian, you've been on the Campfire Project in the past, telling your story and talking about mentoring men and the work you were doing there. And more recently, I got an invitation to come along and be part of your Kintsugi Heroes. And I just thought after the launch the other day, more people need to know what you're doing and about the people that you've brought into the group and the reason why you've done it. This is a bit of a change from what you were doing before, Ian. So how did this come about?
Well, I've always loved reading inspiring stories, particularly autobiographies. People like Nelson Mandela, people who've been through adversity. And in the early 1990s, I had an idea that if I could capture these stories into a written book, so a number of different stories, that would give hope and inspiration to other people who may be going through some life challenges. And at the time, I didn't have the self-confidence, probably still don't have a huge amount of self-confidence, but I didn't have the time or the money. So I documented what I thought should be done. And I wrote to 3 community leaders in August 1993. So we're coming up to 30 years ago. And one of them was Dick Smith, the well-known entrepreneur. And he took the time to send me back a handwritten note, which I kept. And the handwritten note said, "Ian, this is a great idea." And then he added, "You do it." And it just sat there, and life was busy with family and a whole bunch of other stuff. And you mentioned before mentoring men. Well, at the end of last year, I stepped aside from all operational responsibility with mentoring men. There's now a paid, dedicated team who look after the operational aspect. Still an ambassador, but it gave me a little bit more time, which is sometimes dangerous for me. And I spent a few months in reflection. And then I thought back to 1993 and this idea. And I had a chat to my wife, Helen. And then I decided I'm going to do this. And whatever I do, regardless of lack of skills and ability, I just commit to doing. And I made the decision I would do everything I could to make this project where we share inspirational stories happen. And so it started. I let a few people know. A couple of months in, a mate rang me. He said, "Ian, I've got the name for your project." And he said, "Oh, it's Kintsugi." I said, "I've never heard of it. What is it?" And he explained, and I've done a little bit of research. So the legend is, I don't know how true this is, but the legend is there was a Japanese emperor who had some valuable pottery, like probably far more valuable than this. But over time, it chipped, it broke, it bit cracked, and he wanted to keep it. So he said to his craftsmen, "Put it back together so you can't see there was any breakage." And they couldn't do it, but they could put it back together, cover up the cracks using a precious metal like gold. And now when you look at this thing, it's far more valuable than what it was before. You can see it's been through a hard time, but it's valuable in terms of cost. And if we look at the metaphor with people who've been through adversity, they're far more valuable to the community they're in. They've got the resilience, they've got the lived experience. And so I thought, it's a brilliant name. Around that time, I also met Aveline, and what a blessing she's been. Like I mentioned before, a lot of this stuff is just way outside my experience or skill set. Aveline's a professional podcaster. She does a lot of this stuff from a business sense. So it's a fantastic match. And we came up with Kintsugi Heroes. We started capturing stories. I think there's about 30 stories that Aveline's hosted, and there's another probably 40 in the pipeline. And initially, what I agreed with my wife, Helen, because we are funding this, it would be, we'll catch us some conversations, we'll do some podcasts, and we'll do one book. But it's amazing how things can change. I've learned so much through this process. It's been a real education experience for me. And I shared at the launch, I've now got a much bigger dream with this. And my dream is ultimately anyone going through a life challenge or anyone going through adversity will be able to readily find a story, an inspirational story that they relate to personally, and it relates to their particular challenge. And the original idea was just like a book of generic adversity stories, but I'm now seeing huge power in having theme-based ones like addiction, abuse, mental disability, physical disability, migrant refugee stories. And we got a huge kickstart. We put in just for a couple of grant requests, and we're successful with one in the Alpine area of Victoria, which got decimated in Black Summer bushfires. So in conjunction with our partner, the Myrtleford Neighbourhood Centre, they've given us some funding to capture the stories of people impacted by the bushfires. And the idea is to get the community healing, talking, particularly men coming out and sharing the emotions. And through that experience, I've been talking with a lot of people down in the Alpine area, and many people mention the name of this psychologist, Dr. Rob Gordon, who I spoke to a couple of weeks ago. And one of the key things that stuck with me, he said, there's a traumatic event and people think, okay, then you get over that. But there's 2 years down the track, there's a whole lot of other trauma that people don't see directly related back to the original traumatic event, but it does, it indirectly relates. So he thought the timing was brilliant. So as part of this project, we'll be going down to the Alpine area. We'll be having a number of events down there. Already had a chance to be in the local papers on local radio, and we're looking forward. The podcast launch is planned for March for the Alpine area, and then there's yet another book which will capture these stories. Yeah. Hopefully I answered your question.
I could listen to this all day because this is the stuff I love to hear, the people who are getting out and doing the work. But you're absolutely right. When people write about their story and somebody else gets a chance to read it, who's been through something similar, it's like they, first of all, know they're not alone. They've been through something that somebody else has been through, but they also know how the other person has handled it, so they can then apply some of that to themselves as well. So that's absolutely brilliant. Av, I know that you've been doing a lot of work with businesses and helping them to grow and get it together. You would have noticed some of those things with the business people and everything else. What brought you from that role area to doing the podcast here?
Well, first of all, because the opportunity presented itself, Ian asked. It wasn't that I went out looking for, another thing to do. But I also know the power of story and the power of connection. And that's what my other work is based upon. And I've seen the power of that in the collective and community. And so now this whilst this is not in community in a live sense, there's just myself and one other person when they share their story. It's been really fascinating just watching how the stories are unfolding. And I'm just getting a kick out of, I guess, facilitating the space for people to share that story.
Brilliant. Tell us a little bit about some of because if you're running those interviews, you're the one who's feeling the passion, the feelings that the people have got. What impacts it had on you while you've been hosting the podcast?
This is a really good question. I approach each conversation with a very clean space. And one of the things that I ensure is that I don't know about their story before they begin talking. Occasionally in the pre-interview chat, they might have mentioned something, but I do let them know I don't need to know your story. And that way I can create a very blank space for them. So it's very open. I'm very present, and I guess because we're all different as humans, like we've all been through our own stuff. I was never sure starting out how I may be triggered or not through these conversations. And I've heard pretty much, I won't say everything because I know there's a lot more coming, but I've heard a lot of stuff in these 30 conversations. Everything from grief, loss, addiction, lots of trauma. Gosh, abandonment, divorce, and when we say addiction, different types. What else? Loss of partners, children, death, death across the board. Anyway, so there's been a massive amount of discrimination, disempowerment, abandonment. So there's a lot of stuff there. And all those things I just rattled off, we all get impacted by in different ways. When we watch a movie, we can be impacted by something, and we might cry, we might not, we might just sort of be moved. But when it's a live story, it's a human being sitting in front of me, sharing their story, it can be emotional. I can get very emotional. There was one story last night. This is a lady who, I won't tell everything, but she's got a lifetime of chronic pain, has neurological and spinal conditions, could die at any moment. And as she's talking about her story, there were moments in it where the tears are sitting there, and then because I've done a lot of meditation and present work, I'm able to just let them pass, so that I can stay very present and focused in creating the space for her. So it's not about me allowing myself to sit and watch a movie, because that's not what I'm doing. It's my job to ensure that she's or he is able to finish telling their story in the right way. So I've got to stay present enough and not carried away by emotions. So I do get triggered occasionally. I always feel moved, but I'm able to move on from perhaps a tear trigger. There's only been a couple of times that's happened where it's sort of hit and it's there, and then I have to stay present for them. Hope I've answered the question.
Yeah. Go ahead, Ian.
Yeah, can I just say, I've listened to a few of these, and looking forward as the new ones are published. I think Aveline does a brilliant job, and one of the things I like, it's all about the hero sharing their story. There's virtually there's no interruptions, and the hero takes the story where they want it to go. And the emotion, I was in tears last night listening to Tracy Potter's story, and to me it's just a total natural reaction. But I just love the way it's not so much an interview, it's a conversation, and the conversation is driven around the hero's story. And I think it's a great mix. So I'm really excited about the way this has been done. And I should add, Alan, I haven't seen your story yet. I saw the snippet, which is a fantastic quote where you talk about separation. If we really care about the person, then we'll let them go. And it's if only more men and women could take that attitude going through separation, we would have a lot less of the community issues we have at the moment.
I think that's very much true. But I know what Aveline feels like when you, as you said, you hold that space for somebody, they become the most important thing in your world at that time. Making sure that it's a safe and place for them where they can tell their story and being unrestricted by questions and everything else. And as you said, Ian, watching the conversation just go where it needs to go without interfering with the thing. Because I know when we ask questions, we steer the conversation. Whereas when somebody finally feels that they've got that opportunity, a safe place, somebody sit there to hold their space, listen to them and not judge or, try and counsel them or anything else, their unconscious mind can then speak to their conscious mind. And quite often they talk about things, they go, I never thought I'd ever talk about that. Yep. I'm surprised it actually came out.
In the mentor training course, there's a very strong focus on active listening. And I know you both would fully understand this, but often people are only listening with a view to what they're going to say next. And I think what we're seeing with both of you, the way you conduct these conversations, you really are truly actively listening there. And as you're saying, Alan, that actually then helps people, encourages people. If you know you're being really heard, then you start to share deeper and deeper.
That's it. Being able to listen to understand, not listen to respond.
Yeah. And Dr. Tracy Potter, the lady that Ian just mentioned, he listened to that conversation last night. She came on to the evening launch event. I think you were at the morning one, Alan. And she made a comment at the end. And it was really beautiful because she gave feedback of how she responded to actually sharing her story. Her story was is a deep one, and it's fantastic. Like every story is great. It was quite emotional for her, even though she'd shared the story before many times and in front of a lot of people. She said that she got quite emotional because it was so cathartic. There was another level of healing for her, and she said she actually felt heard. And that was a massive thing for her because she hadn't been heard for years from people. And even though she'd eventually found someone to help her heal, just being able to talk about her story without limitation, in a safe space, made her feel like there was some validation, there was some acceptance, some understanding. So yeah, she just reflected exactly what you said.
Brilliant. Yeah, so with, as you said, how many people have you, how many people are you going to interview over the whole period?
Well,
Or is it how long's a piece of string? Is that what I've just asked?
So six months ago, it was probably going to be 15 to 20. We're also looking at the book content. So originally it's just going to be the first book, and it's probably going to be around 12 stories. But as I said, there's 30 conversations that Aveline's already hosted, another 40 in the pipeline. Look, my dream is this is a legacy long after I'm gone. This will continue. It will never end. There'll just be constantly new stories, new podcasts, new books, and that's what I'd love to see. So let me say, I hope there's an infinite number. I hope it's like the TED Talk type concept where it just never ends. And if obviously funding from my personal point of view is a big issue, but I think when people understand what this is all about, it's going to resonate. And we put in for, I think, 3 grant requests, and we got 1, which is unbelievable hit rate. We're just waiting for the official charity registration to come through, which should come through hopefully in the next week or so. And that will then open up a number of other avenues to get this story. Just yesterday, I had 2 meetings with people who are supporting CAL, culturally and linguistically diverse people. And this would be such a fantastic resource to be able to give people coming into Australia. Here is someone with a similar story to you in a similar language from, similar culture, whatever. And yeah, so that's where I want to hit. But it's going to be dependent on getting some financial support from somewhere.
Excellent. Well, I've probably got a couple of contacts for you as well. That's what we're here for, is to help each other and make sure that we can, as they say, leave the world in a better state than we found it. As they say, what you do for yourself dies with you, but what you do for others isn't always will be eternal. So that's what we're all here for. So without giving too much away on the stories that you've listened to, as you said, there's quite a few you've already interviewed. There are little bits about different people you can talk about. Because I know, Ian, you were talking about somebody before who's actually a musician, and the music you've listened to, and that has really touched you as well.
Yeah, to be honest, I'd never heard of this bloke. I guess I've been too busy in recent times to get into music. But one of our heroes, who has his own amazing story through addiction and now giving back, suggested I connect with this other guy, a guy based in Alice Springs. His name is Colin Lilly. And he said he's a musician. And so I Googled him and we connected. And then I listened to these songs and I'm just blown away. In my earlier years, I loved Cat Stevens. And this guy, I say he's a Cat Stevens sound-alike, only better. And he writes his own songs from the heart because he's been through incredibly difficult time to get to this point. And he said, I just love Kintsugi Heroes. And if you want, you can use these. It nominated a couple of songs he said, in fact, one of his songs is called Broken. And he said it just resonates with the theme of Kintsugi Heroes. And I'm trying to work out how to utilize that. I'd love to, when we arrange events, say in the Alpine area, to bring Colin down and just have him perform. Like he's been on tour with Diesel, not the engine, but the singer. I see he's going on tour with someone else. I saw he's just got back from Nashville, and his wife is a federal government minister, Indigenous, and so there's a really powerful combination. So I'm looking forward to him having the conversation with Aveline, but also looking for opportunities to use this brilliant talent that Colin's got around songwriting and singing. If people are interested, he was on The Voice. He sang Cat Stevens' Father and Son, and I'm not sure how it fit. Sorry, people turned their chairs around, which is good, but I'm not sure how far he went within The Voice. But he would have got my vote. I'm gonna buy his music. That's enough. I haven't bought music for 40 years, but I'm gonna buy his music.
Well, the good thing about that is, if he's interested as well as being able to use some of his music as themes within, as you said, the Alpine, but also in recordings and other things that go out. It's like, I've done courses with people before, and some of the students have actually written music for the people who ran the courses, and that then became their theme song. And it's always music that has a passion that connects with you, that brings you back to the story they told as well. And the more you play that with all the other voices, all the other stories, it connects all of them together. Because music is so powerful.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But for me, the last 10 years, the music's been mainly the Wiggles and the kids, the grandkids stuff. So it'd be good to get back into some more meaning. Now, on the subject of music, so Av and I did a bit of a podcast for the very first episode to launch. Aveline plays 7 musical instruments, which is 7 more than me. So, Alan, what's your musical talent like?
Out the window. I will put it this way. I used to sing in the shower, but when I came out of the shower one day and found the woman I was dating at the time and her daughter and my boys all standing in their doorways with their arms folded, shaking their heads, no, I was banned from singing after that point.
Look, you should do things if they light you up, right? So if you like singing, sing. Doesn't matter what anyone else thinks. There you go. There's permission.
No, it's much better if you can actually do it well, though.
Well, this is true. Yes. If you have an audience, that is.
That's it.
Yeah.
Okay. So with some of the other stories, so is there a little bit more you can touch on some of those?
Oh, look, some of them have been really let me provide some context. Some of the stories are with people who are talking about things that affect everybody, disempowerment, marriage breakdowns, mental health issues, depression. And look, I think those kind of things affect everybody at some point on some level. So we can all relate to them. And then there's been a number of stories where they are out of the ordinary. Growing up in a house where your parents are in the bikie gang and your house burns down at the age of 3, or you get thrown against a wall when you're 2 years of age, you get it because your house is filled with domestic violence, and then your mother gives you away at the age of 4. Those kind of stories that you would not or normally see in a movie. There's those. And then there's been stories. There was one lady last week or recently who gave a very beautiful account of her journey to become a mother, and then actually losing that child, died in her womb, and having to give birth, and the journey after that. And in contrast, there was a story with a man who spent roughly 30 years with his wife, 20 years, a long time, trying to get pregnant and never being able to, and then never having children. So it's the far corners of the human experience. And another one, addiction. I've talked with a number of people with different types of addictions. Usually when we think of addiction, we think of alcohol and drugs. There was one story with one gentleman whose addictions led him to jail because he was robbing, stealing to get money to pay for his drug addiction. And to show how desperate he was, once he got on a plane, he was in England, and he flew from London to Sydney because the heroin wasn't good enough in the UK. So like I said, these are things that you kind of go, what? They are out of the ordinary. And there's a lot of that, but not every story has to be that. And that's where some people come on and say, Aveline, I've got serious imposter syndrome. I don't think I've got a real story to tell here. And it's not because they've heard any other story. They don't know anybody else's story. They just genuinely think they've got nothing to tell. And I start asking them questions, and then I realize actually they do have a story. And then I frame it for them, and they go, oh, okay. Are you sure? And I've had a couple that still, before we hit record, go, I need to tell you. And one person, when I hit record and I introduced them, they said, now, just before I start telling my story, I just need to say that I really have imposter syndrome, and I really am, don't really need to be here. So there's literally two ends of the spectrum in terms of, the human experience.
Yeah, well, having that imposter syndrome is a major part of their story as well. So they do have a story. As a profile, I know there's no two people on the planet who have the identical personalities.
No.
Everybody's had different experiences, and therefore everybody has got a story to tell.
Yeah.
And, who are we really to say whether our story is worthy of being shared?
Exactly.
There's the people who listen to it who will tell us the value of it to them.
Yeah, I actually watched that one. I think Av and I are talking about the same conversation where the woman talked about imposter syndrome, and then she went through, and that story was just unbelievable. What she went through, the addiction, the abuse, and it was just so empowering. And I guess we're focusing with the discussion around the hard stuff, but I want to stress the stories are fantastic in terms of the hope and inspiration at the end of it. This is where they were, and this is where they are now. And Aveline was interviewing John Millam, who's the very first hero on Wednesday night. And the question was around the lines of, given what you've gone through, how's that changed you? And he made this comment, and it was like, it's changed me. It's just as important as the telephone box was to Clark Kent. Is that, and I thought, I just love that. So the adversity was the telephone box changing him from this mild-mannered reporter, show my age, to this dynamic Superman who's got an absolute passion to support men or support people, reduce suicide, and he's just a great ambassador for men's mental health in Australia. But I love that analogy that he gave.
It goes very much along with the fine china, as you talked about before, and that, because I know that if you have like clothing that was damaged, instead of throwing it out, they used to use stitching that made it quite a unique pattern on the clothing. And the same thing with the china, the vases and everything else, because as you said, it's what went back into putting it together again, the thing that person went through in the first place, that gives it the power of who they are. So everyone says to me, Alan, would you change the things you've done in the past? I go, no, because I regret a lot of things. I would have liked to have done things differently, but I'd never go back and change them, because I am the person I am today because of those things. And I would hope to think that there's a lot more value that I give because of the things that I've been through. If you've never been through anything, what have you got to offer to other people?
lived experience is just such a huge asset. And to be honest, I didn't fully understand the importance of it until we started going down this path here. Very hard to support people going through challenges if you've got no relevant lived experience yourself.
And I think I really love the fact that from what you were talking about, where you thought you started this and what you had in mind, to what's now unrolling out and what's still around the corner that you haven't seen. And so that's what I really love about it, because it wasn't just, okay, this is what we're going to do, this is the plan, we're done. But it's taken a life of its own because of the passion of the people that you're bringing in. And so
I think we never stop learning, and until the day I die, my goal is to learn something new every day, all the time, and I've learned more in the last 3 years than I've probably learned in any other 3-year period of my life through this. And I'm not ashamed, but I acknowledge that I was incredibly judgmental and ignorant of a whole bunch of stuff. It's through this Kintsugi Heroes and through mentoring men has enabled me, hopefully, to become a better person, better able to support the people around me.
I just want to add, just in case it wasn't clear, we only launched the podcast 2 days ago. So we've launched with 4 episodes plus the little intro with Ian and myself, which goes for about 20 minutes. And then we'll be dropping episodes every Wednesday thereafter.
And see, that's why I wanted to get you on here as quickly as possible, because I thought right at the very beginning, instead of doing it later on, everybody having a backlog of stuff to go through if they want to catch up, they can get in early and stay with it all the way through and not miss out on anything.
Thank you.
Can I put a couple of plugs in? So I said Aveline's been the driving force behind all, as well as the conversations, all the technical stuff, but our website's been launched this week, which is kintsugiheroes.com.au. And the podcasts that I've mentioned are on all the main streaming platforms. And if people, if what we're doing here resonates with people, we would welcome donations or support in some other ways. And from the website, there's a donate option on the homepage. We're actually going to start a crowdfunding campaign in the next couple of weeks around getting more addiction stories, a broader diversity of addiction stories, because it's something close to our heart. So yeah, there's plenty of ways that people could get behind us and show the support for what we're doing.
Excellent. And I know when I was on the thing the other day, you put in the chat box all the links. I've already grabbed all of those, so we'll make sure that they go into the show notes. One thing I'd like to be able to do as you launch each of them each Wednesday, you'll have your links of, are they videos as well as audios? Okay, I'd love to get the video links and put those into the Campfire project so people can then get to see them as well. Because I know with busy lifestyles and with Christmas and everything else, quite often we get caught up in other things. So if we've got a number of places where they can get access to exactly the same video that goes back and you can see your stats on your video system, but at the same time, people can find it in different locations to get back to wherever you've got them stored. I'd love to do that if that's okay.
Thank you. That'd be wonderful. Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
I don't know about you, Aveline, but when I sit and I do these talks with people, I feel extremely grateful and feel like honoured that people actually share their stories. It's a gift that we receive. So for anybody else who's thinking of telling their stories, yes, we're doing them on the Campfire project. We've done over, it must be about 380 one-on-one so far. Wow. And had those conversations. We've done another 180 panel discussions and a lot more. They'll be happening on a regular basis, at least once a week next year. And then to sit down and have those people tell their stories, it's quite an honour for us to receive that. And I really commend the work that you do, Aveline, because I know the podcasts that you've run before and that I've been a guest on those. I knew your passion and for people, not just business, but for the people in the business and everything else. And I knew as soon as Ian said that he was going to have you doing the podcast and everything else. Well, I knew it was going to be a winner already because of his passion, but I knew it was going to be a winner as soon as he said he teamed up with you. So anywhere that we can support you, that's what we're here for.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks, Alan.
What I'd like to do on the very tail of this when it goes up is take the video, if I can get it, for the one that you presented the other day, and put that into the video. So it becomes the finished So we'll finish up with people hearing a few of the conversations, or the ads, talking about the conversations that were had, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, great.
Awesome.
Excellent. Okay, well, thanks very much, Aveline and Ian. I really appreciated you coming on and sharing the story, because, as I said, especially at this time of year, a lot of people are going to go through a hard time. So to have things that they can actually go and listen to and not feel alone is so important.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. For some reason, Gregory Smith's podcast came to mind then for people being alone. And he's been on Australian Stories, done a couple of TED Talks, but he had a conversation with Aveline. It's one of the first of the podcasts that released. That should give hope to anybody. It's the greatest, I was going to say rags to riches. Anyway, I won't spoil it, but if you're going through a hard time, please watch or listen to Aveline's conversation with, I'll let
Gregory
a little bit
Smith.
out of the bag, Professor Gregory Smith.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. That'll be brilliant. Okay. And again, thanks very much. And to everybody else who's been listening in, go and check out the links, follow on whichever your favorite platform is, because I guarantee there's so much gold in the conversations, and there'll be a lot there that you'll get some good feelings out of as well. So again, thanks very much, guys.
Thank you, Alan.
Thank you.
So here we are. It is another episode of Kintsugi Heroes. And I'm with Lena Papadopoulos. I'm here with Aaron Beatus, Gregory Smith, Ian Forrest Jones.
I did horrible, unspeakable things when I was in active addiction.
I spent 5 minutes on the floor in a fetal position.
I said goodbye to my wife on the bed. As I watched her go, I remember a little bit later looking into the eyes of my kids as I shared that news. And no heart survives that unchanged.
I just had this knowing that I wasn't supposed to die, and that there were things I was supposed to do in my life and people that I was supposed to help, and that I was meant to be here.
For the first time in a long time, there was some hope in my life. You know, when we talk about mental health, we just want to really sort of focus in on just sort of looking after ourselves. And if we need to sort of talk to people.
One of the things to realise that so many people break up from their partners, they're angry at them, realising that if we really do care about somebody, then we're happy to let them go.
That what's required, regardless of who we are, is a willingness to be open-minded and to be honest with ourselves. What I say and what I do need to be congruent.
But I kept a hold of this commitment to, I've got to be better, I've got to be different. And so I committed myself to education.
So I started telling people, both in my personal and my professional life, my truth.
If I want something to change, it has to start with me.